Hi, everybody. Welcome to part five of the travel series from Muizenberg Synagogue, where we've had different speakers from around the world and here speak about where they've been, lessons learned. The idea here is to share our lives with other people, especially during this time. And it is a great honor to introduce Hugh Raichlin, who I heard the first time maybe 20 years ago. About Lithuania. My family's from Lithuania. And since then, I know Hugh has traveled the whole world doing different things, he's met communities and unbelievable people. And I'm not going to say much more about that because Hugh, I sent your biography and a lot of people know you. I know that you've got some family members here. So it's treated as you're speaking to family and friends. And I just want to thank you again so much for sharing your experience with everybody, and especially about Morocco. I think you mentioned that it's the first speaking about Morocco fully as one full lecture about Morocco. So I guess it is the theme of the week is Morocco. Thank you, Hugh, and I'm not going to take up any more time. Please tell us whatever you want.
Hello, Rabbi Ryan Newfield. A very big thank you to you, Rabbi, for inviting me. And thank you to the Muizenberg community for having me as your guest. I just want to see that we're on track. If you can tell me if you can see my slides. Okay, we're on. Wonderful. So as I was saying, it's really a privilege to talk to you. I was in Morocco about 2 or 3 years ago. And I haven't really had an opportunity to present my talk. So this is the first time that I'm presenting it. And I think it's such an important discussion to have, particularly in today's modern world where we see that there are terrible or unfortunate tensions between the Jewish people and the Muslims in the world. What astounded me was that when I went to Morocco, I actually had to pinch myself and say to myself, I'm actually walking in an Islamic Middle Eastern state. I'm in an Islamic country. And, you know, for already, about 24 or 25 years, I've been traveling extensively through the Far East, South America, North America, extensively through Europe. And it was always in a Christian country, or perhaps in the case of China and Japan, not Christian, but other Eastern religions. And here I was walking in a Muslim country. And I couldn't believe that I felt unthreatened, that I felt that I was accepted. I wore my yarmulke in the streets. And we actually kept, I'm sure everybody has been keeping over the past few years with Rabbi Warren Goldstein, the Shabbat Project. And we kept the first Shabbat project in Marrakesh in Morocco. And we walked a 45-minute walk from the synagogue to our hotel in the street, men with white shirts and black pants, women dressed, all of us wearing our kippot. And all we heard was, Shabbat Shalom, Salam Alaikum, Shalom Aleichem. And it was, for me, the most astounding thing. So what I'd like to share with you for the next, I think it's going to be about 45 minutes. There are about 30 odd slides. What I want to do is I just want to take you literally on a whirlwind tour. One can't become overambitious. If I had to do a full presentation, it would take me about an hour and a half. So, of course, any presentation that tries to deal with a country in 45 minutes, it's impossible to say it all. Can you imagine doing a 45-minute talk about Israel or about South Africa? You can't possibly. But what I hope to do is touch on some of the main aspects that I feel are important to give you a taste. So really today is a taste of Morocco, and most importantly, to address what I said initially when I began to speak, what is it that makes Morocco different and special, and why was it that they joined the Abraham Accords in December 2020? We're talking as part of history. We're now sitting in July 2021. A mere 7 months ago, this country, Morocco, joined together with several other countries to sign a peace accord with the State of Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, these things don't happen in vacuo. They don't happen in a vacuum. What was the history behind Morocco that makes them a friend of Israel today? So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the present day king of Morocco, and his name is Mohammed VI. And he's a member of the Alawite dynasty, and he ascended to the throne on the 23rd of July, 1999, approximately 22 years ago, on the death of his father, King Hassan II. And the first few photographs in my talk are going to have text, because I think it's very important that just in a few pictures, we kind of tie up the history and the details of who's running the country and how the country is in its thinking where it is today. Just as general information about the king, his net worth was estimated at around $2.1 billion, and he's the richest king in Africa. Of course, Morocco is in North Africa, and according to Forbes magazine, he's the 5th wealthiest king in the world. So he's a man with a certain amount of power, and certainly money brings power. Mohammed obtained his PhD degree in law with distinction in 1993 from a French university, and we'll see that this is going to be a common theme, because Morocco, as we know, was a protectorate of France, and therefore a lot of French people came to Morocco, so it's got a very French influence in terms of the culture. You often hear French in the streets. It's one of the official languages of the country, and a lot of the Moroccans go to study in France. And the king was no exception. His father sent him as a young man to Paris to go to university in France, and he's a very bright man and was a successful student, getting his PhD in law with distinction. He speaks Arabic. He speaks Berber, which is the indigenous language of Morocco. Those are the Berber people. He speaks English, French, that we would understand, and Spanish, because they're very close to Spain geographically. All citizens in the country, and this is very interesting, and I trust that you will agree with me that this is very different from many countries in the Middle East. There is freedom of thought, ideas, artistic expression, and creation, very dissimilar to many of the dictatorships and many of the political regimes that we see in the Middle East. So already you're seeing over here why, of all the countries in the Middle East, Morocco would be one of those to sign the accords. In recognition of the importance of Morocco's Jewish heritage and using his own wealth, he began a project of restoration of a dozen synagogues, 167 Jewish cemeteries with 12,600 graves. So this is a man who's dipping into his own pocket as a mark of respect to a people that he knows have lived in the country for centuries. In fact, we were told when we were in Morocco that the Jews arrived in Morocco before the Muslims came into Morocco. And there were Jews that even intermarried with the Berber population. So he recognizes that this is an indigenous population that's been in the country for centuries, and more importantly, is a country that has benefited tremendously from the contribution of its Jewish citizens. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure many of you have heard me speaking before. One of the things that I always talk about is the disproportionate contribution that Jews have made to every single country in which we've lived. It's true of America today. It's true of South Africa today. It's true of English Jewry. It's true of all the European countries. It's true in Spain that the Jews made an enormous contribution. And that to me is one of the most fascinating things, that we've always punched above our weight, that we are so tiny in numbers, but yet look at the amount of Nobel laureates, look at the disproportionate contribution we've made. And of course, that's always at the back of my mind as to why there's anti-Semitism.
Back. Good to have you. Thank you, Alan, for giving us a little bit of Israel and Morocco, but I think we're back with you. Hugh, can you hear us?
Okay, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome
Hugh, we're back.
Okay, so our internet went down in the office. One of my staff phoned our IT guy who dialed in, and he said it's inexplicable. Okay, so who was the grandfather of the present king, Mohammed VI? So the His father was King Hassan II, and before him was Muhammad V, who lived from 1909 until 1961. During the time of the present king's grandfather, Muhammad V, there were 250,000 Jews in Morocco. So that's double the size of the Jewish community at its height in South Africa. And what's remarkable is that he refused to deport his Jewish subjects on humanitarian grounds, and he blocked efforts by the Vichy officials in France, because the Vichy government were aligned with the Nazis, and they got an order to deport all the Jews from Morocco to kill them in the European death camps. Muhammad V, to his eternal credit, never listened to the Vichy government, and he blocked efforts by the Vichy officials to impose anti-Jewish legislation in his country in Morocco. Now listen to this, it gets better. When King Muhammad V met with representatives from Nazi Germany, that's how intent the Nazis were in wiping out every Jew in the world. They sent representatives to talk to Muhammad V. They asked the Vichy government to contact him. He said, the Moroccan king said both to the Nazis and the Vichy government, there are no Jewish citizens in my country. There are no Muslims. They are all Moroccans. I don't differentiate between religions. I only have Moroccans. I'm not handing anybody over. And that makes you think of the King of Sweden and other people that very famously stood up to the Nazis. And that's why I say there was free choice. It was the free choice of the Lithuanians and the Poles to kill their Jews, and it was the free choice of the Swedish king and the Moroccan king to protect their Jews. Morocco gained its independence on the 6th of March 1956 from France, and that king, Muhammad V, played a big role in the independence movement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go on to a fascinating aspect, and that is that in Morocco today, there is a Jewish advisor to the king. And we were privileged to meet him, and I'm going to tell you how we met him in a few more minutes. But his name is Andre Azoulay. Has anybody on this call heard of Andre Azoulay? Good. So Ellison, I heard at the tail end of your discussion. I understand that you've been to Morocco, Ellison. Good. So Andre Azoulay is a court Jew. Now, as we all know, in Europe, there were court Jews. I mentioned the Abarbanel earlier, that was in Spain. And here is a man in 2021 who has the ear and is the advisor to King Muhammad VI. And he previously served under Muhammad's father, King Hassan II. Andre Azoulay was born in Essaouira, and we're going to see where Essaouira is on the map, to a Berber Jewish Moroccan family. Now, you remember I told you that the Jews were there very early, and some of them married into the Berbers. They must have obviously been Hugh, and he carries both the ancestry of the Jews and the Berbers of Morocco. He was educated in Paris, and we mentioned earlier the connection between Paris and Morocco, where he studied economics, journalism, and international relations. And he had a long career within the Paribas Bank in Paris from 1968 to 1990, where he covered the Middle East and North Africa region. He studied about the Middle East. What we were told when we were there was that the French Prime Minister at the time, I think it was Francois Mitterrand, phoned the Moroccan King Hassan II, and or no, it was the other way around. The Moroccan King phoned the president of France, and he said to him, "We are looking for a very competent banker, somebody that can be my economic advisor, because I want to push forward and I want to grow the economy of Morocco." And apparently, the French president said, "We have the perfect man for you. He's born in Morocco. He comes from good stock. He studied at the Paribas Bank. He's an economist in France. He will be fantastic for Morocco." And the shidduch was done, and Andre Azoulay went back to Morocco to be an advisor to the king. And he was an advisor to King Hassan II from 1991 to 1999, and thereafter to the current King Muhammad VI. And he has been instrumental in implementing economic reforms, which have gone throughout the country since the early 1990s. So he's a big player, and he's had a major influence, and he has a very close relationship to King Muhammad VI. Azulai is known for his historical input into the following up of the peace process in the Middle East. So he's proudly Jewish, knows how to walk the tightrope very carefully, not to isolate himself, keeps in touch with what's going on in Israel. He told us when we met with him privately that he has children learning and living in Israel, and he's proud of that. And he said that he talks to the king about Israel, and when he visits Israel, he talks about Morocco, and he has always striven to create dialogue between the Arab Muslim world and that of the Jewish communities in Europe, the United States, and in the diaspora of all the Moroccan Jews. So this is a man who has got an international stature, and he wants to bring people together. So when I asked Rabbi, maybe we should just mute everybody except me. Background.
Okay. I think there's one person.
Thank you.
Please continue.
So when I said, why was it that Morocco signed the Abraham Accords in each of those countries, and we haven't got time to do that today, but there's no doubt that each of those Middle Eastern countries that signed the agreements with Israel, and I saw this in the Israeli press, there was a history before. You don't just automatically one day change from an enemy to a friend. There was a lot of work going on behind the scenes with the Mossad, with the Israeli government, and there was always a warm relationship with Morocco, but Morocco had to be very careful not to isolate itself in the Arab world by being too out connected to the state of Israel. Andre Azulai's wife is Katia. This is not Katia, this is actually his daughter. And she was also born in this city called, or this town called Essaouira on the coast of Morocco. And they've been architects behind the renaissance of Essaouira. So the Azulai family deeply love the city, and that's where they came from, that's where their family came from. And of course, because he's got the ear of the king, he's had, thank God, the budget to bring into the city to uplift it. They built an airport nearby, they've fixed up the roads around Essaouira, and he's even got government funding to rebuild one of the most ancient synagogues in the Melach, which is like the ghetto of Essaouira. Due to Andre, Essaouira hosts 7 music festivals a year, from classical to lyrical, and it's always a Judeo-Muslim connection. It's called the Andalusian Atlantic Music Festival, and he gets Jewish musicians and Muslim musicians to play together. And there are many Jews that are highly skilled in Moroccan music, and there's even a rabbi that travels from Israel, and that was my connection. That's how I got to Mr. Andre Azulai. There's a rabbi that we're going to see shortly, and he is invited to participate in these wonderful music festivals that brings Jews and Muslims together, something quite unique. And that was even before the Abraham Accords were signed. And Audrey Azulai, that's the photograph of the lady that you're seeing on your screen now. Audrey Azulai, who's the daughter of Andre and Katia, has been the Director General of UNESCO since November 2017. So you can see that this is a family of shaker and movers, and even the next generation is playing a very influential role across the world today. So Morocco, as you can see, has a population of approximately 34 million people, 33.8 million, of which Jews today number 2,200. So from being a majestic community of 250,000, just before, in the 1940s, 1950s, it's come down, it's dwindled to a population of 2,200. The capital of the country is Rabat, and the largest city is Casablanca, and you can see Casablanca on the coast. Our journey took us to Meknes, where there are 50 Jews, Fez, another approximately 50 Jews, Casablanca, 1,500 to 1,700, which is by far the largest community of Jews in the country. Ifran, Medelt, Erfoud. Alison, I hope some of these are ringing bells for you. Marrakesh, good, I like the thumbs up. Marrakesh, where we've got about 100 Jews, that's the second biggest community of Jews. Azemmour, Ouarzazate, Ait Benadou, and Rabat, which is the capital, where we saw the king, the palace of the king. And then there are other Jewish communities in Agadir, where there are about 40 Jews, and in Tangier, where there are another 40 Jews. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a beautiful photograph of Fez. And this is also one of those moments when I said, hey, I'm in the midst of a Muslim country. I'm in an Arabic country, and look at that architecture. Look at the palm trees in the foreground. Look at the old city surrounded by the wall, and then you've got the new city in the distance. Just like you have Lahavdil, Jerusalem, you've got the old city and you've got the new city. So in 1947, there were 2,300 Jews in Fez. And who did it include? Well, I've laid the groundwork. Physicians, advocates, and industrialists. In fact, the oldest university in the world was built in Fez. So here you have Jews making this tremendous contribution. Out of 2,300 Jews, you've got physicians, advocates, and industrialists. Before Jewish immigration in the 1950s and 60s, who were the Jews of Fez? They had a Zionist B'nai Akiva. They had a WITSO, a women's Zionist organization. They had branches of the World Jewish Congress and groups that studied Hebrew in this ancient Jewish city of Fez. Where did the Jews go? They went to Israel, they went to France and Canada. And what is the common denominator over here? Where they speak French. That's it. Right? And today there are less than 100 Jews in Fez. And yet, even though there are less than 100 Jews, in the 1980s they built a kosher restaurant. So if you fly into Fez today and you need kosher food, go straight to the Rambam Center Maimonid in Fez for a magnificent kosher meal. And this is just giving you a little bit of a preview of one of the delectable items on their menu, which no doubt was made in a beautiful tagine. Beautiful.
Delicious.
Delicious. Then we walked around the city, and here you can see typical Islamic architecture, those lovely, the typical Moorish doors, which we also saw in Spain, in Toledo, that if you go to the synagogue over there, you'll see that the Moors came in and renovated the shul and put in these Moorish doors. And one thing you notice as well about Islamic architecture is that there are no figurines. There are no pictures of people or animals. Why? Because just like the Jews, they are our cousins. They come from Abraham Avinu. They don't want to make idols. They have a problem with idol worship, and therefore it might be construed that a person is praying to that image that is on the wall. And so therefore, they have circles, squares, stars, and multi-sided polygons, various geometric patterns. And when I was researching this, and we haven't got time to go into it today, but each geometric pattern has got a relevance in Islamic theology. It connects to different parts of the world and its history. Now we walk around Fez, and what do we see over there? We were all looking, we're all waiting for the colors of Morocco. So on the left-hand side over there, you can see the magnificent spices as you walk down the market in Fez. And on the right-hand side, for all the South Africans in the group, I had to take the photograph, a picture of Mandela for sale, I think, on one of the market fronts in Fez. So what happens in the south of Africa also finds its way up to the north of Africa, and they know about the famous Nelson Mandela. We then went into an ancient synagogue in Fez, which was built by Jews that had been expelled from Spain in 1492. There was a massive migration. As we know, there was one migration that went across Europe, and then there was another migration that went into North Africa and particularly into Morocco. So that really gave an enormous boost to the numbers of Jews in Morocco when the Jews came from Spain, and this was built by the Spanish Jews. That's all we have time for in terms of Fez, and now we move to Marrakesh in Morocco. And when we went into the synagogue in Marrakesh, we saw that this was once a Lubavitch yeshiva. And this is also very fascinating because I went into the history of it, and Lubavitch was already in Morocco in the 1950s and late 1940s, even 1950s, and they were already sending shluchim to bring Hasidus into the Moroccan world. And this is one of the signs on the synagogue over there, where they also had a yeshiva where people were learning full-time already in Marrakesh 40, 50 years ago. Now, this the influence of Lubavitch, please don't think that that's where Yiddishkeit started. The Moroccan community is an ancient community with many, many famous rabbis that came from Morocco, and they are obviously Sfaradi, and they've got very set traditions, and they come from a really illustrious stock of Rabbonim. But this was just very interesting that we kind of think of Lubavitch only being in the Western world and in more modern times, but this is an older community of Lubavitch in Morocco. And this is the synagogue. By the way, one of the most famous Rabbonim from Morocco that we often quote is the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who wrote a commentary on the Chumash and various other works. And in our shul, we learn the Or HaChaim on a weekly basis, one of the greats of Moroccan Jewry. This is the synagogue in Marrakesh, and you can see it's built in the Sfaradi style, as you would imagine. And look at this magnificent photograph of Marrakesh. When you walk through the streets of the old city, that blue, which was explained to us, is against the evil eye. That blue is against the evil eye. And even if in Israel, when you go to Tzfat and you go to various other places, you'll see the blue, and you'll see the blue ornamentation on the hand, which is all to do with keeping out the evil eye. Then we went to Essaouira, that's where the Azulai family came from, and we were told that in the 1880s, about 40%, 4 out of 10 people that were walking around in Essaouira in the 1800s and early 1900s, 40% of them were Jews. And that's why Andre Azulai feels a closeness to the city, because it was really a Jewish town for all intents and purposes. And the more wealthy Jews would move out of the Jewish quarter. So just another parallel with Europe, just like you had the ghettos of Europe. And when I say ghettos, let's not get caught up in that terminology, because ghettos are mainly connected with the Holocaust and with the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, but there were always Jewish areas. In Spain, you had Jewish areas which were called the Juderia. In Europe, you had in Vilna, you had the Jewish quarter. You had in Poland, in Warsaw, there was the Jewish quarter. Jews chose to live together. The same way as, I guess, in Cape Town, you have concentrations of Jews in various parts of the city. Sea Point, etc. I'm not going to mention all the details. You know what I'm speaking about. And in Johannesburg as well, you have a certain concentration in the northeastern suburbs of Johannesburg, Sandton, etc. But the richer Jews moved out of the Jewish quarter and they lived elsewhere. And in Morocco and in Arab countries, the Jewish quarter was called the Melach. Melach. And where does that word come from? It comes from the word melach, meaning salt. Because in the Middle Ages, Jews were given a very special dispensation to be salt traders in order that they could earn a living. And so the area of the salt traders was the Jewish area, and it became called the Melach. And there was a committee formed to rehabilitate the town. And King Hassan II's advisor, Andre Azulai, is very much behind the rejuvenation. I spoke to you about the Andalusian Festival of Music. And when we walked into one of the buildings, we saw a poster of the show of the concert that they had in October 2017. And I told you that Jewish people flew in from Israel into Morocco. What's very interesting is that they never stamped their passports at the Moroccan airport. When they flew in, they went in through a separate door so that when they left, their passports would never reflect that they had gone into Morocco. So there again, we're talking pre-Abraham Accords, where there was an understanding, an unwritten agreement that when Jews arrived from Israel, their passports were not stamped, but they went through the airport informally, as no doubt was Rabbi Chaim Luke. And he is a man today in his 80s. He's the father of a very close friend of mine, Yossi Luke, who I was friendly with in Johannesburg, born in Israel, came to South Africa, married a South African girl, in fact, a Cape Townian, and has gone back to live in Israel. And it was through my friendship with Yossi that he connected us with Andre Azulai in Morocco. And this is his father on the right-hand side singing in the festival. King Mohammed VI of Morocco was also at a rededication ceremony of the Etegui synagogue in Casablanca, the big Jewish community, in December of 2016. So it's already 5 years ago. That's a tremendous compliment that the king himself, the #1 citizen, goes to the rededication of a synagogue. It's the same as the late Indira Gandhi, who went in 1967 to a 400-year-old Paradesi synagogue in the south of the country, in Kerala, in Cochin. And when I talk about the Jews of India, I say, can you believe it? Out of 1 billion citizens, you had 80,000 Indian Jews, and Indira Gandhi goes to the rededication, or no, it wasn't a rededication, it was the 400th anniversary of the Paradesi Shul in Cochin. That's remarkable. Look at the status that these beneficent leaders give to the Jewish community, be it in India or Morocco. We then walked around the city of Essaouira, which is also known as Mogador. Names change depending on who's ruling the country or the city. And we went into one of the ancient synagogues in Essaouira, also known as Mogador. And once again, you see the blue, which means that the Jews take on some of the customs of the local people. And as we saw blue in Marrakesh, so we see the Jews using the blue in the synagogue in Essaouira. We then went to Casablanca, and now this is the biggest city and the biggest concentration of Jews in the country. And here you see a beautiful functional shul in Casablanca. And wherever we go in the world, I'm the scholar in residence of a company called Kosher Travelers. You can see it on the internet, koshertravelers.com. And wherever we go, we make sure that we have kosher food. And when we were on this trip, when we went to the smaller places, we had to take food with us in the bus. But when we went to the bigger cities, we were able to organize kosher food through the synagogues or through the rabbonim in each of the cities. And wherever there is a minyan still functioning in a city, we make sure that we are there either for Shachrit or Mincha or Ma'ariv, because we feel that that connection with the local Jewish people is so important. It was beautiful to walk around this compound in Casablanca. It was a large city block in the middle of the CBD, where they had that beautiful synagogue, a lovely school, and even a kindergarten, a nursery school. And this is a photograph just outside the shul of the nursery school. We then went to meet the rabbi in his office. These are on the extreme left-hand side is David Wallace of Kosher Travelers. He's the guy that I work with when we take these tours all over the world. And the others are people in our group and the rabbi of the shul. This is a beautiful, beautiful shul in Casablanca. This is the Temple Beit El, and it's the largest synagogue in Casablanca, and it can seat approximately 500 people. And you can see it's in the Sephardi style with a little bit of an Ashkenazi influence, actually, because very often it's a more Middle Eastern architecture, but this has got a kind of a blend. We then met a very, very special man, and his name is Rabbi Jackie Kadosh, and he is the rabbi in Marrakesh. And I told you that we brought the Shabbos project to Marrakesh, so he joined us for dinner. We had benching cards that we had brought from South Africa celebrating the Jewish, the Shabbat project, and we had a wonderful video that Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein had recorded that we played on the bus just as we were coming towards Marrakesh to spend the Shabbat over there. And he runs this small community. All his children are in Israel, and Rabbi Jackie Kadosh runs the community. A lot of it is out of his own pocket because many of them are old and indigent. Unfortunately, COVID hit the Moroccan Jewish community quite hard, and we lost a lot of Moroccan Jews, unfortunately. So that number of 2,000 might be quite a bit lower now. And he's very passionate about it. And he had the option of emigrating and being with his kids in Israel. And he's decided that he'll continue to fly with his wife in and out of Morocco to look after the community in Marrakesh. And of course, when we went to Marrakesh, we looked for the beautiful markets. And here you see those magnificent colors of the different fabrics, the carpets, the handbags, and all of the things that the Moroccan community are so famous for. And that's, of course, I think all of us in our mind's eye, when we think of Morocco, we think of these gorgeous colors and perhaps those blue streets that we saw earlier. Of course, the beautiful pottery. And we schlepped back a tagine so that we can try and bring back a taste of Morocco to South Africa. I'm not sure. I think we've used it once or twice since we've been back. And then we move on to Rabat, the capital of Morocco, and this is the current palace of King Hassan II. This is typically Middle Eastern, as you can see, not like the winter palace of the Romanov family in St. Petersburg, or what you might see in England or France. This is typical Middle Eastern architecture of the King's Palace in Rabat. We then went into the Melach of Rabat, the Jewish quarter, and this is an ancient synagogue that is still functioning to this day in Rabat. And this is a local lady that was there, and she let us into the shul, and we saw it over here. Once again, you can see a lot of the use of wooden paneling, like we also saw in the shul in Fez. And it was quite remarkable. The two ladies immediately on my left and right were young girls at the time that the Jews left Morocco between 1959 and 1961. And they both told us that they had come back on a tour with other Moroccan Jews from Israel to see their roots. It was a roots to roots tour. They wanted to see their heritage. And they both remembered, first of all, sleeping in the shul on Yom Kippur, but they both said that their grandmothers had a minhag, a custom to sleep in the shul with their grandchildren on Yom Kippur, that they could wake up in the morning and start davening with the community nice and early. And both of them recounted to our group how they were woken up in the middle of the night, and they were ferried to the docks, and they were put on boats, and they were taken in the dead of night. Their suitcases had been packed by their parents. Their parents had not told them when they went to sleep that they were going to be escaping that night. And under cover of dark, they were taken to the port. Some flew out on secret flights that had been organized, and others got onto the boats. And approximately almost 100,000 Jews left Morocco in a couple of months to go to the land of Israel.
Oh, have you enjoyed it?
Yeah.
We then went into the Sahara Desert, and this is a photograph of myself, and behind me my wife Michelle, and we went on camels, and that's also a wonderful thing. Alison, I'm not sure if you went on camel rides. You did. Good. Alison, you can get my number from Rabbi Ryan Newfield, and you can give me a ring. And anybody else that's on this webinar that would like to talk to me about Morocco, if there's anything you'd like to correct me about, I'm not the world's expert. I'm a person that is constantly learning. If there's any feedback that you'd like, you're welcome. Yes, Alison.
Did you take the camel ride where you went with the 4x4 Jeep into the desert? And
yes.
Then in the middle of nowhere is the camel place. And then you go with the camel and you sat on the dunes, which is some of the highest dunes in the Sahara, and watch the sun go down.
Absolutely. The sun go up. We watch the sun rise.
No, we watch the sun set. And then we went back to the Bedouin where the camels were, and we had dinner there with them.
Okay, so we didn't have dinner with them. We were in a hotel. We were woken up at about 4 or 5 in the morning when it was still dark. They put us in these 4x4s, and they sped like hell into the desert. And then we went up these massive, massive dunes, as you say, some of the highest dunes in the world. And we watched the sunrise, and they're Berbers, not Bedouins. These are the Berbers.
No, yeah, they're Berbers.
Berbers, yeah. And Michelle and I actually took the headdress off one of the Berbers. He couldn't believe the chutzpah of this guy. I took it off him and I put it on, and he was quite cool with it afterwards.
I got them to make it, to fold it
over your head.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So please, as I say, if anybody wants to phone me and have a chat and share things with me, you're welcome. And you can also get my email from Rabbi Ryan, but it's very easy. It's hugh@raichlin.co.za. And Raichlin is not spelled R-E-I like the Raichlin pharmacist in Muizenberg. It's R-A-I-C-H-L-I-N, hugh@raichlin.co.za. And then what about this?
What is the name of your travel group that you go with? koshertravelers.co.za or
.com. koshertravelers.com. And also, if you can put up that I have a Facebook page called Hugh Reichlin's Jewish Heritage Travels. You're welcome to like it. You're welcome to scroll through it and see photographs of Lithuania, videos that I took in India. Many of the trips that I've taken are covered. It's Hugh Reichlin's Jewish Heritage Travels on Facebook. And you can also email me or phone me, whatever you like. And this is just a beautiful scene in the desert as we were coming back after having been on the dunes. We passed this amazing city that's built into the rock of this mountainside. And you can see they built it all in this sandstone. And it's quite remarkable how cool it is. They've got a genius architecture over there, so that in the terrible heat of the desert, you're actually very cool indoors. And just look at the colors. It's just, for me, this is stunning. So as we come to the end of our presentation, we will look at the immigration that took place from Morocco. There was an agreement between the Israeli Prime Minister then, David Ben-Gurion, and King Hassan II, that's the present king's father, that between November 61 and spring 1964, the Israeli government paid $500,000 as a down payment, and then they paid $100 per Jew that was able to fly out or get on the boats to make Aliyah and to go to Israel. Approximately 97,000 Jews left Morocco for Israel by both plane and ship. The operation was called Yachin. There was there've been various operations. There was Operation Magic Carpet. I'm not sure, I think that was from Iraq or Yemen. I'm not sure which one that was. This one was Operation Yachin, to take the Jews out of Morocco. And what is Yachin? It comes from the Bible, because two of the central pillars that held up the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem, that was built by King Solomon, were called Yachin. And Israel regarded immigration into the country as major pillars that supported the existence of the Jewish state. And thank God, as a result of all that immigration over the years, we have today, Bli Ain Hara, almost 7 million Jews living in Israel, which today is the largest Jewish community on earth. They've overtaken the American Jewish community. And unfortunately, that's due on the one part to immigration, but on the other hand, there's a tragedy in it, because it's also a decrease in the population of American Jews through assimilation. Tragically, on the 10th of January 1961, a small boat called the Egoz, which means nut in Hebrew, carrying 44 Jewish immigrants, sank on the northern coast of Morocco, and this created a crisis for the Moroccan authorities and foreign aid groups who were assisting the refugees. Why did the Jews leave? It's a very interesting question. There are different theories. I don't know which is correct. There are some people say that when France gave autonomy or independence to Morocco, there was a feeling amongst the Jewish community that they couldn't lean on France if something went wrong in Morocco, and they felt vulnerable. There's also another theory that says that there was in fact no threat to Jewish life, although there had been certain issues over the centuries where there were anti-Semitic outbursts. But there are those that say it was simply Israel through the Mossad that wanted immigration. They wanted to build up the country, and they wanted the Jews to come and settle in Eretz Israel. It's a long discussion, perhaps, for another day. And then to conclude today, let's look right up to now, the 7th of July, 2021. Just on Sunday, a Royal Moroccan Air Force plane, this is, I think, is the C-130, landed at Israel's Hatzor Air Base on the 4th of July. That's literally 3 days ago, because there's a joint military exercise taking place in the Negev with various countries. But look at this. This is the first time that a Moroccan plane has landed in Israel. And I also understand that it wasn't only one of these big carriers, but it was also military planes, but they're not going to publish that on the internet. And just as a little bit of an aside, following the Oslo agreements in 1994, there were already offices that were set up between Israel and Morocco, but they were closed in 2000 during the Second Intifada. So Morocco has had to side with the Arab countries, and as a protest to what happened in the Intifada, they closed the Israeli offices in Israel, and the Moroccans closed their offices in Israel. Then, as I've mentioned, there were the wonderful Abraham Accords under President Trump, which was a tremendous breakthrough. And without getting political, I think that what happened under the Trump administration was absolutely miraculous. And he brought about change which we haven't seen in decades in the Middle East. And I just hope that we don't lose the impetus of what he created, that people shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. In June of this year, literally a month ago, King Mohammed VI he phoned Naftali Bennett, our new Prime Minister, after he became Prime Minister, to congratulate him on being appointed the Prime Minister of Israel. Isn't that remarkable for Morocco to phone? And that's the warmth now of the relationship between the two countries. Morocco, to its credit, is the only Arab country to teach Jewish history and culture. Casablanca's Museum of Moroccan Judaism is the only Jewish museum in the Arab world. What's also incredible is, does anybody know the amount of refugees that left Arab countries around the time of the creation of the State of Israel? Almost 1 million. They say over 900,000 Jewish refugees left Arab countries, but that's not spoken about. The fact that they left just with the clothes on their back and a suitcase, gave up homes, gave up businesses, that's not spoken about. But what is spoken about is a much smaller number of refugees coming out of Israel that were told to leave by the countries that attacked Israel because they would then come back once Israel had been vanquished, and the Jewish people, thank God, were not vanquished. But that's a discussion, once again, for another day. Today, there are 1 million Jews of Moroccan descent in Israel. That means that 1 million out of approximately 8 million means that 15% of the Jewish population in Israel are of Moroccan descent. So they are big role players in the country today. And we conclude with these wonderful, wise words of a man who I have considered my Rebbe in so many respects for so many years, the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. And with these words, I will conclude. Life is a never-ending stream, and a trace of us is carried onward to the future. A generation dies, but another is born. Lives may end, but life does not. Those who live after us continue what we began, and we live on in them. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. So today we do have a Moroccan Jewish community. There's a very small community in Morocco itself, but the Moroccan Jews, 1 million of them living in Israel, many of them still observant, many of them keeping the customs of Morocco, many of them remembering their forebears, and many of them keeping the unique culture of the Moroccan Jewish community. And that to me is so special and so important. I don't think that Israel should be a melting pot where people lose their connection to the past. I think we should live in harmony. I think there should be mutual respect. But all of us want to feel that we are carrying forward what we have brought to the Jewish people. I'm a proud Lithuanian Jew, a proud Litvak. I'm proud of the history and the culture from which I come. And I believe that each and every Jew, from whichever country they come, should bring with them that rich culture. They should be proud of their culture. And they should contribute to the community from that cultural vantage point. And together, please God, we should live in harmony and all see the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem and the coming of the Mashiach soon in our days. B'meira, B'yameinu, Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Hugh. Hugh, can you just stop sharing your screen? And then I will... If you can just stop sharing your screen. There we go. So first of all, Hugh, I want to thank you so much for speaking. Number two, I want to thank Colin Shapiro for reminding me that I should ask you to speak about anything historical. Number three, you were worth the wait 100% and more. And I feel like I've been to Morocco, but now that you've shown that there's a little kids area by the shul, I have to take my family. I have to take my family there. And yeah, that was just a delightful presentation. I just have one practical question. If anyone else wants 1 or 2 questions, we can go for a few minutes if you have the time. My question is, did the Jewish people in Morocco speak English? Could you talk to them, or was your medium Hebrew? How do you actually talk to the local Jewish community there?
We spoke in both English and Hebrew. You know, Morocco, as I said, is quite a cosmopolitan country, where they were always used to tourists coming in from various parts of the world. So when you walk through the market and you talk to the Moroccans, most of the time you can speak in English. And to members of the Jewish community, it was either in Hebrew for those that had gone to Israel, who've got children in Israel, they picked up the language, or they would speak to you in English.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Maybe you want to look through the chats. I know there's a lot of people saying most interesting, wonderful, etc., which thank you for those comments. But of course, whoever was here knows that was the case. Does anyone have any questions about Morocco or anything in particular? One person had a question: where is the challah? They saw all the spices in the market. They didn't see any bread or challahs. Do they have like a certain type of Jewish food? Is there such a thing as Moroccan Jewish food?
Well, I think that the cuisine of the Moroccan Jewish community is very similar to what the Moroccans eat. They eat in the tagine. They have a lot of meat. Lamb is a very popular dish over there because they have, it's lamb country, and vegetables. All the spices are the Moroccan spices. So, for example, when we ate in the shul over there, it was an absolutely delicious meal, but you could certainly taste that Moroccan culture. As I say, the spices, the meat, the vegetables, etc. I can't recall if the challah was unique. That I can't recall.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm just looking quickly through the comments. The refugees from Arab countries were about the same number. Okay, there I differ with Jenny. There were many more Jews that were refugees from Arab countries. Okay, thank you so much for those that posted such wonderful compliments. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Marilyn, Corinne. I think we've covered. If there's anybody that wants to ask anything, but I think we've covered everything in the chat.
My last question, Hugh, is again, thank you for wonderful. Mervyn Rosenberg's got a question, but before he goes, I'm going to close with this. When are you coming to do round 2 of Morocco in Muizenberg Shul?
Whenever you invite me, Rob.
Okay, you're invited.
As they say, at a mutually acceptable and agreeable time, it would be my pleasure. As you know, I've got roots in Muizenberg. Okay. My late Uncle Harold and Auntie Frida lived in Muizenberg and were very involved in the shul. And my cousin Colin, as you know, is a proud Muizenberger. So it's very close to my heart. So it would be my pleasure to come down one day when we don't have to be apart.
When you come, we'll make you some Moroccan food. You come. How's that? Extra cause.
Good. Or you can make me Indian food and we'll talk about the Jews of India. There's quite a lot on my menu.
Okay. Okay, great. Mervyn, yeah.
Yes, Mervyn.
Do they speak Ladino?
No. I didn't.
Is Ladino not spoken anymore?
Mervyn, it's a good question, because the truth of the matter is, if you recall, I said that in 1492, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, they came into Morocco, and even that synagogue in Fez was built by Spanish Jews. So I've got no doubt that in the early years after the Spanish migration, there were Jews speaking Ladino in Morocco. But we didn't hear it amongst the people that we were with.
One of my ancestors was burnt at the stakes in 1492. He was a Rabbi Hillel for refusing to convert to Catholicism.
Wow. How did you trace that?
Through one of my cousins that lives in Israel.
That's amazing. Now, you remember when I mentioned the guy that I travel with, David Wallace of Kosher Travelers? So his name Wallace. There's a Rabbi Wallace. Maybe Rabbi Newfield will know his name. I can't think of his first name. There's a Rabbi Wallace that I think is with Aish HaTorah in Israel.
Maybe Rabbi Willis.
Willis. No, there's a Willis in Johannesburg, but there's also a Wallace. And he also has got records tracing him back to the last Jew that was killed and was murdered at the stake in Spain, and his name was Valles. And he's a direct descendant of that last Jew, the last Jew to be burnt at the stake. It was called auto da fe, and that was the way Jews were murdered in Spain and Portugal. So it's amazing, Mervyn, that you see. Now, this is also fascinating. Were your family from Lithuania, Mervyn?
Yes. Lithuania and Germany.
Now listen to this. You are a living example of what I talk about on my trips, because many of us people that call ourselves Litvakas or East European Jews, our roots are in Spain and Portugal.
Absolutely.
Because in 1492, when the Jews were kicked out of Spain and Portugal, the communities in Germany, which was called Ashkenaz, that's why we called Ashkenazim, and Poland and Lithuania were tiny communities. And their numbers were bolstered, just like the Moroccan Jews. Their numbers were bolstered after the expulsion in 1492. So also there was a huge influx of Jews from Spain and Portugal into Lithuania, Poland, and Germany, and they assimilated into the Ashkenazi community. So my Zayda Avasholem, Zayda Yankelebe from Rosenstein, from the gardens, from the Ponneviser Schule in Gardens in Cape Town, he told my mother that there was a tradition passed down the family that our family originally was from Spain. Before we became Litvaka 600 years ago, we were Spanish Jews, just like you, Mervyn. So you and I might even be mishpocha from Spain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating? It's, you know, the Jews to me, I mean, I can talk all day about the Jews. I think we're absolutely fascinating.
It's something to be so proud of. It's absolutely incredible that what we have achieved when we've been hated worldwide is when I think of it, I get so tearful and everything, but it's something to be so proud of. It's unbelievable.
It's something to really be proud about. We have defied nature. All the people that have attacked us in history are no more. The Babylonians, the Romans, the Greeks, all the civilizations that try to wipe us out, they are gone and we are here. That's why when we go to Titus's arch in Rome, we say, Ich bin da. There's a famous tradition to say, Ich bin da. Wo binst du? Where are you, Titus? You gone. I'm a Jew, a proud Jew, walking under the arch of Titus. And look at the inordinate contribution we've made. That's the amazing thing. It's not only that we've survived, it's what we've done in the world. We brought monotheism to the world. We've contributed in every sphere. Just a remarkable people.
Absolutely.
A remarkable people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, lovely talking to Mervyn, and I look forward to meeting you in Cape Town one day. Do you live in Muizenberg? Where are you?
Colin Shapiro's mother, Frida, told me that through my family, I'm the longest existing member of the Muizenberg Jewish congregation. But I don't live in Muizenberg anymore, but I still belong to the synagogue.
Beautiful, and that's why you're part of this webinar this afternoon. That's absolutely wonderful. Colin's mother is my Auntie Frida, my beloved Auntie Frida. She's no stranger to me. I grew up in her home, ate her biscuits, and went down to Muizenberg Beach. One day when they excavate Muizenberg Beach, they're going to think that it was a chicken cemetery.
Okay, there were 3 double stories in a row. Mine was the first.
That's amazing. And there was another family next door.
Lockage.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the Shapiros.
Good. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. I feel invigorated. I feel inspired. And lovely talking to you. And please, God, we should all be able to talk again.
Thanks, Bud. Thank you, Hugh.
Pleasure. And
thanks a lot.
Pleasure. And just before we go, I just want to thank
one comment from not to visit Morocco again. But thank you.
Say that again.
I said you had a comment from Alison. Nice to visit Morocco again. Thank you for taking us to Morocco again, Hugh.
And I thank Alison for participating. And I just also want to thank my cousin, my beloved cousin Colin, for having put me forward. And I hope I did you proud, Colinka.
Fine, I want to tell you, you got two Aussies still staying, and they're still awake in Melbourne. Ilana and online.
Oh, wonderful. How's it, guys? Thank you for staying
1
up.
o'clock in the morning, they stayed to listen to their cousin talk.
Oh, go ahead, guys.
Yeah.
And also Eli Rabinovitz in Perth.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eli.
And I think Chaim is online there with Paul. Yeah, he is there. Chaim's are there as well.
Wonderful.
You see Paul West, there's Chaim.
Listen, I always say that the best definition of the Jewish people is not race, not religion, but family. At the end of the day, all of us on the webinar are actually one big family. We're all cousins. We all come from Abraham Avinu, Sarah Imeinu, Yaakov, Yitzhak. We're just on a journey together, different parts of the world.
Am Yisrael Chai and Salam Alaikum.
Salam alaikum, Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you very much. Louis, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Yes.
Bye.
Pleasure, cheers.
Stay safe and well, everyone.
Oh, man.
Marilyn, look after yourself.
Outstanding, Hugh. Thank you.
Reverend, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Hugh. 2 knots in a row. It was lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
What's happening next week?
Speak to your rabbi.
Hey!
Listen, it's taking us to Iceland, Alison.
That's an unbelievable place.
I'm yet to go there.
They've got a Jewish community there.
In Iceland?
But no Muslims.
In Reykjavik?
Yeah, but no rabbi either.
From Tangine to Matsubosu.
Okay, I've got to daven mincha, everybody. God bless. Good night.
Thank you again. Yishkayach.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Cheers, cheers.